Hi, and welcome to another episode of Twice as Hard. I am Janelle Benjamin, the founder and CEO of All Things Equitable, and I'm really pleased today to be with you and Ms. Colleen James. She's the founder and CEO of Divanify Consulting Incorporated, and she's also a renowned educator and community builder. So welcome, Colleen, to the show.
Thank you, Janelle. I'm excited to be here with you today in conversation, talking about all things celebrating Black excellence, Black women.
Yes. I think it's timely. We've come off the heels of Black History Month. We're coming off the heels of Women's History Month, and the intersection of our Blackness and our womanhood, our femininity, is always at risk, particularly in the workplace. And you being a workplace consultant, I think you're a perfect guest to be able to kind of flesh this out with me a little bit. So tell me a little bit about your experience, Colleen, with just what's happened to you in the workplace, and I guess the ways in which you've also had to work twice as hard to get where you are today.
Absolutely. I think it starts even before the workplace. When I think back, I think about the school system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having to show up, be perfect, and just fit into this mold and this conditioning of what it means to be successful and professional, and all of the things that started in elementary school, and then in the workplace, how some of these patterns still continue. So talking about things like the othering in terms of our hair, right? And I think back to when I was a child and people trying to touch my hair, and then touching the hair in the workplace, and connecting the dots there, right? Into the workplace and experiences that I've had, a lot of silencing, a lot of being brought into the space, not seeing me, but not hearing me and not feeling valued, right? A lot of the opportunities that I saw that existed for some of my white folk colleagues that I had to write a business case for, right? Attending certain leadership sessions, and I had to prove and write while others were being tapped on the shoulder. And I had to keep doing all the things and never getting the opportunity.
What field were you in?
So this is interesting. So a lot of my field was spent working within political environments, as well as financial environments, and some nonprofits. So I've got an education as well. So and the similarities that existed within all these sectors, right? It's so funny, Janelle. I think back, I forget and then I remember. And I remember working at an organization, and I was doing the job. I was in the job. I wanted to be an event planner at the time, and I was helping with events and all of the things. And the opportunity came up, and I didn't get the job, even though I was already doing the job, which we know, right? They put us in these roles, we're doing it. And I didn't get the damn job. Oh, sorry, I may not be able to swear. I didn't.
No, you can curse.
Because apparently at one event that I was helping out at, I left breadcrumbs on the table. That type of stuff, right? The expectations.
So petty.
So petty, the expectations that we have to be perfect in order to achieve something, when it's not realistic, right? So we always feel like there's, everybody's watching us under a microscope, especially Black women.
Yes.
Yeah.
And for the viewers who, I guess, many of them might be watching, who are not racialized, nor are they Black, they may not understand, what we're talking about when we talk about the experiences of Black women and how unique it is. The oppression that we experience because of this intersectionality, right? Yeah. And intersectionality, for those of you who are not familiar with the concept, is the concept of, when you're combining two aspects of your identity, two or more aspects of your identity, and it creates unique modes of advantage or disadvantage based on the combination. So for example, I am Black and I am also woman, I'm female. And so, my experience is going to be different, and Colleen's experience is different, and all the women through this series are gonna have different experiences because of that intersection, right? We're not gonna have the same experiences as a Black man, nor a white woman or a woman of any other racial or ethnic background. And so that's what we're speaking about, right? It's the misogynoir, right? That coined concept from Kimberly Crenshaw that, really impacts us in unique ways.
Yeah. And and just the treatment. I mean, we know, some people say, well, how do you tell? And it's like that intuition that that, wait a second, something isn't right here. I spoke the other day on LinkedIn about that open door policy, where I could see all my colleagues walking into, leadership office, and I'd go in and I would be scolded, right? I didn't see that happening. And the other thing too, the other nuance here too, Janelle, is that in most of the places that I have worked, with the exception of maybe 2, I have always been the only Black woman. Only Black woman. So
that's my experience as well.
Right?
Yeah. And you are
that in itself, when you are walking into an environment where there is, oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, there was a little bit of a lag. You know how Zoom is. I was just gonna say you're in the Greater Toronto area like myself. So for people who are wondering, well, where is it in the world that they could possibly be the only Black woman? Yeah, we're talking about Toronto, Canada, one of the most diverse cities in the world, where we've kind of grown up and gotten our professional qualifications and experience, and still we don't get to work alongside other Black women, not too often, right?
Right. And I'm geographically about an hour west of Toronto. And I mean, growing up, every family knew each other who was Black. That's it. And, it's changed over time, but, the reality is that as the communities change and the organizations that I work with, and I'm sure you work with, they don't reflect the community, and they do not reflect the greater society. And then how can these institutions, organizations make decisions when there's nobody around a table that can say, this is the lived experiences, this is what your employees are going through, and it continues to happen, right?
Let's talk about that. The impact of us showing up in these spaces, and this notion that it's twice as hard for us when we don't see representation. What is that like for us, and what is our experience
when we don't see representation? I mean, first of all, we what do we need to do to protect ourselves, right? Because chances are, is it a space where we can even say a difference of opinion? It's never easy. Some people, I don't know if you experience this, they come in and think we're going to say, this is everything you need to do, and here's what you need to do. But there's still the elements of being tokenized.
Yes.
We still face othering and silencing. I can't even tell you amount of times I'm still in a room and I will be saying the thing, and then somebody else says the thing and they get the recognition for it. And I'm like, but I just said that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Just said that. And that constant othering, and it takes a while to overcome that, to be able to really have your voice and your presence. And Janelle, I've been somebody, when my value hasn't been seen in the room, I will leave. I will just say that's it. And I think we as Black women, we need to recognize that too, because there is this expectation, be it on our own selves, within society, that we always have to show up. And if we don't show up, somehow that makes us somehow less than. And no, we need to protect our peace, right? So in those spaces where we're not feeling valued, we're not being heard, we're experiencing that othering, I'm of the mindset, I got to protect my peace, I got to leave. And
good for you. Good for you. Honestly, yeah, a lot of Black women we're seeing doing that precise thing, especially now through the pandemic, building their own tables. I've done it. I know you've done it, to create something of our own, precisely because in these places where we're supposed to be there every day and spend more time than even with our own families, we aren't being treated fairly. We aren't being treated respectfully. We aren't, we're being marginalized, sidelined, oppressed, passed over. Like you said, our experiences, our opinions are not acknowledged, even when they, you're paying me for my advice and opinion. Like, for most of my career, I've been an advisor. Like, I'm a policy advisor. I'm giving you the advice that I'm hired to give you, and then you want to just reject it outright, push it to the side, discount it, or let's hear what so-and-so over there has to say instead. And it's infuriating. Like, people don't understand how infuriating it is.
So
when yeah.
you know, Janelle, I'm a pretty composed person. I have a lot of tolerance before I get upset, but you know what always happens the minute all of a sudden, wait a second, you say what you need to say. I can't believe that. Oh my goodness, Colleen, the tone you took with me, you know, and that notion that we have to, the angry Black woman comes out all of the time, right? All of those things the minute, you know, and you know, unfortunately for some people who've been on the receiving end, when I get to that point, it's not pretty. No, it really isn't pretty.
But when they push you to it, right? And then it's sort of like we have to resist the urge to play into the trope, right? We don't want to be that angry Black woman, so we're holding it down until, you know, it just reaches a boiling point, and then we can't take it anymore. And I think that's the cumulative effect of microaggressions that people are talking so much about right now, right? Where you're getting that death by 1,000 cuts, and they're gnawing at you over and over and over, and then you can't deal anymore, and then it's time to lash out. It's time to defend myself and clap back.
Clap back. But you know, the sad thing about this is, and I will tell you, in every instance where I've had to be like, no, that's not going to fly anymore, and the punitive repercussions because of that. So there's been spaces where I've been completely like, all of a sudden I've brought into the meetings, and then that stops. No longer included in those meetings, right? And that's, you know, that, and it happens to people every single day.
I'm recalling my own experience, and that's why I had to let out that sigh just now. It's like, you know, all of a sudden it's like, oh no, you know, you don't need to come to that meeting, Janelle, right? The bi-weekly invite that's already in your calendar all of a sudden gets pulled, or, you know, you're told outright, you know, oh, you know, you can have a seat, you know, take a longer lunch today. We're gonna do that without you. It's infuriating.
It is so infuriating. And then you question your mere presence in the space. Well, I don't belong here, right? We talk about this belonging. Well, this is the thing. You know, I've been in meetings where I've brought up equity issues, and then all of a sudden, well, you're the equity person, Colleen. You know, nobody, just, you know, it's like, wait a second, if you care about this the way you say you do, you're going to make sure that everybody's part of this, and you're not silencing or shutting down or saying we all don't think like this. You're the one who thinks like that, so it's not a priority for us. So, you know, having to navigate that, and you know, being usually the only Black woman in the space and doing that, right?
So what do you say to organizations and leaders that you work with now when you're suggesting that, you know, they need to create psychologically safe spaces, particularly for Black women? What advice do you give?
So for those organizations, and I do a whole kind of psychological safety assessment to see kind of where everyone's at, and, you know, what it comes down to for many organizational leaders is they are not, first of all, they're not asking their employees what they need, and finding out, you know, what do they need to feel valued, to have their skills utilized, to feel like there isn't going to be any reprimand for their employees. And you know, the other thing with leaders is really addressing, you know, it's not just about bringing a person in, racialized person in. It's like, what is the experience that is happening there, and how do you retain employees? It's a lot of culture shifting. It's change management in a different form, right? It's completely change management, and changing the processes, the ways in which things are done, centering those voices, right? And protecting those employees that are feeling marginalized and othered. Because if they're not protected, it just continues to build and build and build. And to sometimes come into organizations where there's already been something identified, be it gender issues, there's a whole gender dynamic happening. And, you know, I have to pull the one, if it's an ERG, aside and say, okay, we're going to go through and we're going to see what is going on here. And really separating to bring together again. It's a lot of, you know, that you're facilitating a lot of stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Many conversations, thinking about things completely differently. even the approach to how management is in the style of approach, circular, continuous loop over and over and over again. Just, the ways in which we can disrupt and dismantle the systems of harm.
Oh man. And honestly, I'm finding, I don't know about you, I'm finding it really challenging for leaders who are not racialized themselves, who may lack, a full understanding of the harm, that you just mentioned, the harm that is occurring in these quote unquote slight interactions, right? They don't understand how violent and aggressive those seemingly insignificant slights feel. And they don't know how to operate outside of human resources processes, which they're familiar with, right? They're accustomed to working within those HR systems and handling things in a way that's protectionist for the organization, and tells the staff member, gaslights the staff member, it isn't what you think it is. That didn't actually happen the way that it did. Have several seats and get back to work. And they're not used to having to consider how to prevent harm, how to create safe spaces, how to create psychological safety. I'm just finding, it's a whole new way of thinking for them. And when they bring in someone like yourself or like me, they sometimes think that there's just this like a magic wand, right? Come in and give us a quick unconscious bias training. I'm tired of hearing that.
No, I know.
Everything will be well. Absolutely not. Like, I'm going to give you the training, but you're still going to have biases at the end of the day, and that I didn't do anything to reduce, right? Like, it's not a bias reduction session. Right? It is what it is, right? And I think there's this false perception that, like you said, you can just bring someone racialized in and, we'll sing kumbaya with their staff and we'll go away and all will be well. And absolutely no, because the behaviors of the problematic employees haven't changed, right? The power dynamics, right? The wielding of that power, right? That is what I think needs to be checked, right? And how do employees from within the system kind of speak truth to power in ways where we're not, brought in, right? In organizations where we aren't there. What are Black women to do, right? They're railing against the system. They're struggling. They're meeting these oppressive human resources processes, even when they complain. And so what are they to do, right? Are they to stay or are they to leave?
Right. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes if we need to leave, we need to leave. But I find that, especially being a consultant, they will say, well, you're going to tell us what to do. And you're going to give us all of the answers and all of the framework that we're going to get everything going. And I said, but it's not that simple. And that's not my role. My role is not to tell you what to do. And, leaders who really are committed to the work know that the way forward is going to come from your employees, going to come from those racialized, those marginalized employees, because they're the answer to the problem. Right?
Totally.
They are going to help guide the solutions. And, with leaders in particular in an organization and HR to some degree, there's this notion that they're supposed to solve the problem, right? That they solve all the problems, but they don't want to take any risk.
Right.
They think they've got solutions that are going to help racialized employees, and they haven't asked, they haven't done anything, and the harm continues, or they stay in the training loop. You know about this. It's just an organization keeps training and training and training. I'm like, but your employees are getting harmed still, right?
Yeah.
And that's just privilege. That's complete privilege. That's happening, right? So I approach this as it's a completely new way of thinking. We always say, we want to burn down the system. Well, what does it look like on the other side? So it has to be a completely new approach. And, promising practices, Janelle. It's not best practices, it's promising practices, because this work, it will change and keep going, just as we are individuals who are constantly evolving and growing.
For sure. So, and you've raised it, earlier in the conversation that it is literally in every sector. You mentioned being in education and in finance and like everywhere that you've gone. And so, I want people to understand through this conversation series that, we're not making it up. It's happening to us literally everywhere, whether it's non-profit, for-profit, large corporation, governmental entity, you name it. The ways in which power and privilege are playing out in the workplace and oppressing people of color is just,
all the time. I have employees who will reach out to me. They've got all their education, they've done all the things, they're acting in the role, or they're doing the role, but they're not getting the title change. They're waiting way longer.
You're not getting the salary.
Yes, for the salary. I'll have focus group sessions and I will see people who are racialized and they'll show up with their initials on the name on Zoom, right? Just the initials, right? Like CJ. And then I know it takes a little bit, but I start to, again, build that trust with the employees. And they're like, well, the reason I only have my initials here is because everyone keeps mispronouncing my name and I'm tired of it. And again, it's like, this person is doing the work to protect themselves. I'm like, but that's not your problem. That's, your colleagues, your employers, they need to ensure that you should be able to, your name is your name. You shouldn't have to change to fit into to make them happy or easier for them, right?
Exactly.
It was in a session the other day, and someone was speaking about being commented on how good their English is, and I had to say, well, what is that? And what is good English, right? What is that standard that you're being held to? And that to me is just, it's like, no, this, people have to feel like they have to fit into this white pervasive society of what is the norm and what is perfect, and no, we need to be ourselves in all spaces, and totally. and our differences complement, right? And employers need to see that. The problem is we need more representation in leadership. We need more representation around decision-making tables. Yes. Because they may listen, but are they really going to implement what needs to be implemented in a meeting? Right?
Totally. Colleen, so where did this notion of, fighting for justice and equal rights and things come for you? Where does that originate?
Oh my goodness. It has to be my parents, right? Yeah. I think for many of us, we saw our parents, my parents were immigrants, and not getting the same opportunities, having to do more than one job, having to face discrimination. I remember being in the store with my father when we were younger, Shoppers Drug Mart, and we were followed. And I remember my dad just losing it and being like, why are you following me? And then there were multiple times we were driving and he'd just be pulled over, right? Where'd you get this car from? Type of comments. And, just over even in the education system growing up, I had to switch schools. I recognized one school board was not doing anything to promote and help me advance. And I took the onus to shift and go to a different school board. So it's always been there. And as I've gotten older, there's a book I read years ago, Ralph Ellison, The Invisible Man in high school. And that just kind of said, wait a second, and it just made me go in that much deeper and start paying attention. And even in work environments, especially, I said I worked in, the political environments before, and I didn't have any decision-making role or anything like that, but I was always bringing up a chair and listening, and I would sit in meetings for 8 hours and learn and understand and say, wait a second, but there's voices who are not represented in the decisions, right? So everything is led to the work that I do, and just, we, as as our communities get bigger, more diverse, and there's no excuse for this anymore. It has to stop, right?
Absolutely.
It has to stop.
So how did you get into diversity, equity, and inclusion work? Where did your journey from kind of, working in different sectors, having this sort of, daughter of immigrants, just like myself, what's your journey to the work that you do now? If people are interested to okay, how do I get there? How do
you get into this? Well, I think, obviously lived experience. So I literally was at work and experiencing all of the things, continued to experience all the things. And, I started Devonify about 6, almost 7 years ago. Nobody was talking about DEI. They definitely weren't mentioning anti-racism. Like those were not, but I knew, I was like, people are making all these assumptions and not getting opportunities. I wasn't alone speaking with other employees and knowing Black employees in particular. And I said, you know what, I'm going to start a company that's focused on DEI and then, belonging and justice and anti-racism. Everything evolves, so nothing really stays. So we have to keep growing, and recognizing that there is a need to talk about all of this to make changes, meaningful changes, and most of it, lived experience. And then, married my husband and seeing some of the things he was going through from an immigrant perspective. And, it's not right. And there wasn't a lot at the time, a lot of organizations in Canada in particular. So I did a lot of research on the States, scholars in the States, globally as well. And then when it came to Canada, it was like this void. Everything was in, and if the AODA, right? That was the thing. And thinking that DEI and all, and I said, but this is something different, because if we are in racialized bodies, we are in gender diverse bodies, there is nothing that represents us. There is no specific, we're playing catch up here in Canada, Janelle, we're playing catch up.
Totally. How has George Floyd's death changed things for you? Has it made it easier or twice as hard to get the work and to do what you do? So,
clearly George Floyd's murder was awakening for a lot of people. And I think even for many Black and racialized folk, just us looking deeper too, like, wait a second, it was that point where, enough was enough. Yes, it has helped in business that, this work there's enough work to go around for everybody. That's what I say. But the problem or what is difficult to navigate is really understanding those who are committed to the work versus the performative. And those companies who say, well, we need to have training, or we need to do X, Y, and Z, but you can tell me, and I try and vet as much as possible to make sure, the employers know what they're getting into with me. But sometimes I can tell I'm in it and I'm like, oh, this is performative, and really having to navigate that. So it is, as it's exhausting, right? It is messy work. It is we get pushback, we get called all sorts of things. The other day someone asked me, is there such a thing as positive racism? Still grappling my head around that. Is there positive?
I get those whataboutisms all the time in my training. The other day I got one asking me, what about, it was Women's History Month, right? I'm talking on, I think it was International Women's Day, giving stats and data. And I literally get, well, what about homelessness? Men are more homeless than anybody. And it's, we're not talking about homelessness. Like, if you know me and my brand, I focus on the workplace, and we're talking about gender equity and gender equality in the workplace. Like, stay on topic. Like, people are insane. They want to sort of divert, and it's never racialized people, right? It's people who cannot sit in their discomfort and deal with the fact that we're having conversations that they just don't want to hear about. They don't want to hear about, racialized women, and pay gaps and gender equality and all of these things that we need to have in society, right? It's okay for them to just say, well, let's talk about homelessness. I don't talk about homelessness. That is not my platform.
Yeah. No, they really want to center themselves. I found when that happens, they want to center themselves. It is, they're not ready. There's been times, Janelle, when I've just kicked people out of the session. Like, you're gone. You're taking away from those who are here and they want to do the work, and they want to make change, and they're resistant. You know what? That's fine. You're
good for you. I have yet to kick someone out of the session. I'm pretty thick-skinned, so I haven't done that yet, but you just inspired me to maybe the next time that happens. Like, I've had enough of it, right? It's harmful. People don't understand that it's actually harming me as a racialized woman when I'm speaking about, and a woman again, I'm talking about gender equity and gender equality, and you deflect and say, well, what about men? It's harmful. Right. And if I'm talking about anti-racism and anti-Black racism, and then you turn around and you say, well, what about reverse discrimination? Is there such a thing as, I'm like, okay, here, let's put the educator hat on.
Yeah, I purposely set things up in my sessions to like trigger people. Like I'm like, I need to get you triggered. I need to see so I can say no, right? And just completely get. And I mean, there's been times I've had to do that, and people are like, well, why would you say something like that? That's not. And I'm like, but you're going to assume that all Black people are lazy, or, Indigenous people are alcoholics. I'm like, you see what happens when when it's the power and all of that, you get triggered by it. And, but that's what needs to happen. We absolutely need to trigger.
Now I trigger them.
We're triggered all the damn time.
We're totally triggered. You know what I do now, Colleen? I trigger them and then I answer right away. So I'll say something like, I've had people tell me in my training sessions, what about reverse racism? Well, let me tell you, there's no such thing as reverse discrimination, right? Racism is, one directional, and this is the reason why, and and I go into how it's a violent classification system based on white supremacy and the notion that whiteness is supreme and blah, 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 blah. And then as I'm doing that, boom, I just deflect their comment right off the bat, because I'm not dealing with that anymore. I used to just wait for it. Somebody putting in the chat or, unmuting and then saying the most vile, harmful thing. Now it's like, you know what? I'm going to just refute your argument before you even ask. Like a total, I move into lawyer mode and lawyer tactics, and just like, I'm shutting that down before you even ask it, because you're not doing that. We're not going to have the what about isms in the session. It's harmful. It's harmful to every other participant that's listening as well.
Absolutely. And that's why I kicked them out. Janelle, just kick them out. It's not right. And if that's the angle that they're coming in, is looking to play that devil's advocate, because that is what it is, and the space is not for that at all. Then go. You've got more work to do, and you're taken away from everyone else who was there. And I'm always about whoever is the most marginalized in that session. I'm making sure they're centered and they're protected.
Right. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. Good for you, Colleen. So what's next for you and for Divanify?
So Divanify is, still working with the clients that are committed to change and doing the work. A little further down the road, I've just announced I'll be submitting my name to run for regional council, the region of Waterloo. So that is next. Some political aspirations. Like I said before, I worked in political offices for many years, probably about 15 years, close to, and I was pulling up a chair for so many years, listening, learning, no decision-making power, but watching, especially now, it's time for change. It is time for change.
I'm so happy to hear that.
Seat at the table. Sometimes we need to build our own tables, but in these structures, we're trying to disrupt and change, and we need our seat at the table, and that voice that can represent voices that have never really had the representation in the
I wish you well, because I know in a region like Waterloo, to be a regional counselor is not going to be easy. A Black regional counselor, a Black female regional counselor, it is not going to be easy.
All those intersections.
I wish you well. I wish you strength, health, all of that. And Colleen, for the viewers who want to reach you after this session, what's the best place for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, so info@divanify.com. You can visit my website, divanify.com. We have a mailing list, an email list, comes out bi-weekly, so you can sign up for that. More kind of education, awareness, and thoughts of mine and the work that I do comes out in that mail out. So yeah, thank you, Janelle. Great chatting with you.
Thank you. It was really lovely chatting with you. And I want everybody below, just don't forget to click like, click share, click subscribe to the channel, support Black business, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Twice as Hard. Thank you for listening.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for coming, Colleen.
Thank you.